During his recent visit to Germany, President John Mahama told Deutsche Welle there is no longer room for negotiation with a Nigerian Islamist terror group Boko Haram. He said, quote, "We cannot say we're waiting for negotiations and dialogue while the group continues to abduct and kill people." He was speaking in his capacity as ECOWAS chairman in talks with German Chancellor Angela Merkel on the formation of an anti-Boko Haram force. Interior Minister Mark Oyongo, speaking about Ghana's preparedness for any terrorist attack, also said, quote, "We're not leaving anything to chance, and it's not to see we're taking things for granted," unquote. Well, there are many who are of the view that such political rhetoric with no evidence value to support that anything is being done to fight terrorism is actually inimical to Ghana's stability. If Nigeria, with the strength of its military, is overwhelmed by Boko Haram, must Ghana kid itself to think it is ready? What would make Ghana's Boko Haram ready? Don't we have our own Boko Harams to deal with, like armed robberies, sprawling settlements, becoming havens for radicalization of our young ones? Are the rhetoric from political leaders touting Ghana's readiness good or bad? My name is Stephen Enti, and this is today's big story. Well, since Ghana's Professor Kofi Awono was killed in Kenya's Westgate Mall terrorist attacks, the reality has dawned on everyone in Ghana that terrorism of any kind, either linked to Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram, is not a laughing matter at all. But there are many Ghanaians who are a bit concerned about the political rhetoric and whether indeed it is a true reflection of Ghana's readiness to combat any forms of extremism and terrorism at our doorstep. The posturing of the President of Ghana and his Interior Minister suggests we are combat ready. But is this the case, and does it reflect how prepared Ghana is at all? We're hoping to get Tanko Zakaria Mustafa, who is a media law and ethics lecturer at the Ghana Institute of Journalism, join us in the studio for this discussion. Also, we'll be getting onto the phone lines to speak to some experts who are willing and ready to speak to us on the matter. Let's quickly get on now and speak to Dr. Opoku Edo. I'm told that he's not on the line yet. So if you've just joined us, today we're discussing Ghana's readiness and preparedness as is demonstrated by the rhetoric from our political leaders. President Mahama during his recent visit to Germany in discussions to form an anti-Boko Haram force indicated that Ghana is ready. His Interior Minister is also saying that we are not leaving any stone unturned. So the rhetoric suggests that regardless of the threat that Boko Haram poses to the sub-region, including Ghana, we are all ready, combat ready. The security agencies, according to the Interior Minister, are prepared for any threats that will come to us as a country. So is this rhetoric ideal or good for Ghana's image as a country which is moving towards middle income? My name is Stephen Enti. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Right, welcome back. Let's start our discussions by speaking to Irbad Ibrahim, who is an international news analyst. He's joining us now. Irbad, we're grateful you could join us.
You're most welcome, Steve.
Now, we hear such rhetoric from the president, like Ghana is ready, there's no longer room for negotiation with the terrorist groups, speaking in the position as ECOWAS chairman. Do you see such affirmative rhetoric coming from the president as good or bad from where you stand?
It depends on the perspective from which you look at it. You should understand that the motive may have been born out of goodwill. You know that the yardstick for measuring the success of any ECOWAS is looking at how you help the sub-region tackle its difficult challenges. Between 94 and 96, Jerry Rawlings was chair. and he was instrumental in mobilizing the sub-region in the form of ECOMOG to quell the civil war in Liberia. When J. Kufuor was also chair between 2003 and 2005, his foreign policy posture also helped, sort the political impasse in Cote d'Ivoire and the conflict in Boaké. So when President Mahama became chair in March last year, number one on his priority list was to sort the political situation in Guinea-Bissau. And I agree with me, he's been quite successful in that. Then the second on his priority list was to roll back the momentum of Boko Haram. But somewhere along the line, Ebola struck, and the world's attention drifted from Boko Haram to the fight against Ebola. So Boko Haram has used that grace period to resupply logistics and replenish their losses on the battlefield. So the motive is that coming on the back of a decline in the cases of Ebola, President Mahama, as chair of ECOWAS, wants to leave his footprint in the long-term struggle against a transnational militancy that is really posing an existential threat to the whole of the sub-region. So the calls being made may have been born out of goodwill from the chair of ECOWAS, but I doubt the effectiveness of a multinational force tackling Boko Haram, because we keep saying this, Steve, the problem with the fight against Boko Haram is not a dearth or scarcity of numerical strength. Nigeria's army is more than the armies of all the West African countries combined. It's a standing army of 500,000 people. So calling for Ghana to deploy 1,000 soldiers, Togo to deploy 300, Benin to deploy 500, will do very little to tackle Boko Haram. So let's go back to the fundamentals. Why is Nigeria not winning against Boko Haram? It's not about ECOWAS deploying into the country.
Right, so, Ibad, if I understand you clearly, you feel that it goes beyond rhetoric, that one, if the president as ECOWAS chairman is positioning himself to send out the signal that, yes, as chairman, he's ready to lead a combined military force from ECOWAS to deal with the problem, does it not matter that in his backyard, in his own country, it doesn't look like we are ready physically, militarily, or anything?
I think the Interior Minister, Marco Yongo, has spoken quite copiously on the subject. I don't doubt the capabilities of Nigeria's security apparatus. You know how efficient the BNI has been, and you know how we've also been gathering a lot of intelligence in concert with neighboring West African countries. So I don't doubt that.
Right.
But I think we need to be prepared psychologically for this. This adversary is new. Most of Africa's armies are trained to fight conventional warfare. Counterinsurgency is not part of it's not on the menu at all. It's a novelty to us.
Right.
So the larger masses need to be prepared for this. Our army should be really equipped to tackle this rather than calling trouble on ourselves all the time.
Right. I'll have you hold briefly and I'll return to the studio. Tanko Mustafa Zakaria. It's great to have you here. How are you?
Long time.
Long time. The last time I tried looking out for you in Cardiff, I didn't see you.
I had sneaked back into Ghana.
I know. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Good to see you.
Now, we are concerned, I mean, from your legal background as a media law and ethics lecturer at the Ghana Institute of Journalism, we are concerned about looking at the rhetoric, the communication rhetoric that the president and leaders of this country are putting out there, one, to the international community and to us here locally about our overall readiness to deal with Islamic insurgency. Do you think that the approach is good from a communication viewpoint?
Well, thank you very much. I think, Steve, it's a very, very difficult call. In one breath, you have a situation where you want to demonstrate to your people that, yes, you have things under control, because in this situation, people look up to the leaders to demonstrate some leadership. So you want to demonstrate to them that, yes, we are ready. And how best to do that than to communicate with people, because communication is key in trying to resolve this problem. So you would be communicating and telling the people, yes, we are ready for these insurgents. And that gives your people some confidence. That
But once you're communicating this confidence to your people, you're also actually directly communicating to the insurgents themselves.
Yeah, but that's the problem. It's about what are you communicating and how are you going about that communication. That's very crucial. Because when you're communicating and saying we are ready for them, you are psychologically also telling those insurgents that, look, if you're contemplating making a move to Ghana, don't dare. But the other downside is that sometimes, even in Europe, this situation has led to a situation where the insurgents has dared. Those who are communicating that they are ready. So when you are communicating, then you've got to be very careful that you are actually ready, so that in case they dare you, you have the mechanisms and you have the ability to deal with that situation. But issues like this also puts the government in a very, very difficult situation.
How difficult?
In a difficult situation because in one breath, when you are communicating and you say you are ready, the media, because of the nature of the media likes to sensationalize things. So they can actually take you on and say, how prepared are you?
How ready are you?
How ready are you? And that's where the danger comes in, because strategically, you don't want to actually demonstrate or disclose how prepared you are in case the insurgents get to know your strategy. And if you don't indicate to the media that this is how ready we are, then you leave room for people to say, well...
And you're also seen as weak. It's not a win-win matter in all cases. It is a delicate line that you must thread cautiously.
It's a delicate line, and that's why in these situations, the who communicates is very, very important. You don't leave this type of communications to anybody at all to communicate. So it should be people, because the president and his cabinet ministers are in a luxurious situation where they have access to some sort of classified information that you and I wouldn't have access to. So based on that classified information they have, that could inform how they go about communicating. But if you leave it out to anybody at all who doesn't have access to those classified information,
then we will be speculating, and the outcomes there have its own consequences. Let me get back to Irbad. You heard the analysis that Tanko is giving us, that one, communication is key, but who communicates is also relevant to send out the right message. So the key question I'm asking is that if we must communicate, if the president as leader of ECOWAS, chairman of ECOWAS, and also as leader of Ghana must communicate Ghana's combat readiness and ECOWAS's combat readiness, must this be openly in the media? Shouldn't that be in some form of behind-the-camera negotiations with the relevant leaders?
Hello, Steve, is that question to me?
Yes, Irbad, sorry, the question is to you.
Okay, that's fine. I think, in fact, today the leader of Boko Haram, Abubakar Shekau, issued a communique, and you know so well that about a fortnight ago they overran a military barracks in Baga. And I was shocked at the magnitude of weapons they've been able to capture. Howitzers, mortar launchers, RPGs, and they boasted that those weapons can take on the whole of Nigeria. So therefore, you should be very careful. Today, he mentioned certain West African countries. He mentioned Mahmoud Yusuf, the president of Niger, and then he also mentioned Paul Biya of Cameroon. So military communication is so delicate, it's razor thin. You should keep your military trump cards close to your chest. But that's notwithstanding, I agree with Mr. Tanko that in such a situation that we are seen as a reprieve of stability and peace in an oasis around in our ecosystem, we see a lot of instability in Mali, in Nigeria, elsewhere. It's good that our leaders put us in a certain state of mind, that we have the preparedness to stave off any attack in the unlikely event that it happens. So that's key, but how you do it is unique.
But tell me honestly,
and you those who are disseminating the information should do it well. But social media has not been helpful. Mind you, these utterances came only a few hours ago, but I won't be surprised if the media wing of Boko Haram has already gotten wind of what Ghana is, preparing for it.
Of course.
So therefore, they would also want to counter. But we are closely monitoring the communications of Boko Haram. And that's when they mention Ghana specifically, I think we will let the government know so that we take the right cautions and to be able to fend off any potential attack. But in the meantime, Ghana is not on the radar of Boko Haram.
I see. That's very affirmative. You know that for a fact?
Yeah, I do, because we know the kind of strategies that are being adopted by all these groups, right from Al-Shabaab to ATYP to Ansar and all that.
Right.
That is why I keep going back to the fundamentals. Why is the world sitting on tenterhooks? Because of a few ragtag army of Muslims that are a fringe group. Why does the international community not do the right thing? Why don't we stop the unnecessary military interventions in Muslim countries? Why do not we?
Right, Edward, you're moving into. Edward, I beg your pardon, you're moving into a different dimension of the discussion. We would like to do this together with Dr. Opoku-Edu, who will be joining us on the line. So I'll have you pause briefly. So I'll return to Tanko. Tanko, you had a little reaction to what Edward was saying.
It's very important. I happen to be involved in the minority groups in Sheffield. And after the 7/7 attack in London, there was concern because in Sheffield, majority of the people there were from Sudan, Yemen, and it was a predominantly Somalia. And so I was part of a group called Preventing Violent Extremism. And it was very crucial. And this group...
And your objective was what?
To try and prevent those Muslim young boys from being radicalized and getting involved in this violent extremism. And the approach was very, 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 very tactical. The media was involved because you need to make sure the media knows what you're doing, so they don't go pushing you to come out and tell people what have you been doing, and you'll be forced to come out with very sensitive information. So you get the media involved, but it has to be very selective, because you've got to involve some media personnel who would adhere to the utmost professional ethics. In other words, you say this information shouldn't actually
You think Ghanaian media has been careless in touting our readiness as proclaimed by the Interior Minister and the President, really?
I wouldn't say all Ghanaian media, but frankly, when you look at the media landscape, we have been a little bit reckless at times. But this is national security issue, and therefore the way we go about talking about these things is very important. But that's why the government has to deal with these things in a very collective way. And that's why, yes, it is good. We are saying we are ready. But what are we doing to get the people? Because it's about the raising the security alertness of the very people as well. Because one of the things we were doing in Sheffield was that we were involving everybody. So because this has
and the media was not miscommunicating?
They were not miscommunicating because it was very important, and there were specific laws that actually could actually be hammered on if they go out of the line. But we were involving everybody. We were involving the imams and all those things. But you go around now and talk to the imams. I'm a Muslim. I go to the mosques on Fridays. I have never actually seen the imams using the pulpit to try and sensitize people about the
anti-radicalization messages.
And the fact that we all have to be security alert to look out for some of these things, some of these uncomfortable or unusual behavior by some of our youth, and alert the authorities.
But Edward, I know that you, in the past, when I have spoken to you, have expressed confidence in our religious structures here. Especially you have commended the imams and Muslim leaders for the role they play in ensuring that young Muslims are not radicalized. That appears to me now to be in conflict with what Tanko is just saying, that he hasn't actually seen a formal approach. Your quick reaction to that? Irbad, are you there? Can you hear me? Well, I think we lost Irbad, so we'll bring him back on the telephone line. So maybe
is that on their own, the imams have been doing.
But are you not concerned about radicalization of young Muslims in Ghana?
Well, the situation can be slightly different. When you look at,
are you capable of being radicalized? I mean, you're a young Muslim. You have been educated in the West. You have an understanding of the treatment that people mete out to Muslim groups, including the wars in many Muslim countries, which have all become the basis for which Islamist groups have attacked the rest of the world.
Taking advantage of the situation and politicizing it. Yes, it's possible, but the situations are different. When you look at everybody was trying to go into the cause of all these things, but I don't think you are ready for that discussion now. But frankly, the root cause is something that is serving as a recruiting sergeant for these extremists, because the views they profess has no room in Islam, and that has been made quite clear. But when you find a situation where people are without jobs, they are disgruntled, they are disillusioned about the system, then it becomes very easy for them to play into the hands of those who seek to radicalize. And that situation has been prevalent even in the advanced countries. With all their resources and all the efforts they have been putting in to deal with that, it's not easy.
It's not easy.
It needs a collective effort. Everybody has to be involved in
Everybody means who and who and
you
who. You
and I, the market woman, the imam, everybody has to be security conscious, and you need to be alert to the movements of
But
your
being
group.
security conscious, if the president tells us we are ready, and the interior minister says we're ready, and I have no clue what physical evidence of readiness there is to show, how confident will I be?
Well, but that's why how you go about telling people that you're ready. I would want to see the president and the minister saying that, yes, we are ready, but we can't do this on our own. You all have a role to play in executing this agenda, whatever role it is, even if it means constantly reminding your Muslim child that, and we have to admit, it isn't only Muslims sometimes who have been drawn into this, even non-Muslims, because when you look at the root cause, which has some international politics element and international relations element, there are people who are not Muslims, but they just don't like the hypocrisy and inconsistency that's been demonstrated by the world,
any
and they can
which
easily
seeks to
get drawn into
Right, Ilbad, we're told Ilbad is back on the line. Ilbad, I was saying that Tanko earlier mentioned the fact that he hasn't seen a formal approach from Muslim leaders, imams, etc. in the mosques to try and come up with a formal program to de-radicalize young Muslims who stand risk of being radicalized from groups, groups like Boko Haram. That appears to be a bit of contrast of what you have earlier been telling us in previous interviews, that you are confident that a lot is being done. A quick reaction.
Yeah, I think, first of all, de-radicalizing people that have been indoctrinated is key. The young man who volunteers to be a suicide bomber has been made puritanical because he's been exposed to warped verses of the Holy Quran. How can we cozy up to the person and rehabilitate them? So therefore, I believe so well that to deal with Boko Haram, we should adopt the DRR approach. We should demilitarize, rehabilitate, and then reintegrate them into society. And Muslims need to play an important role in that. Because people are riding on the back of a religion quite erroneously to perpetrate these heinous acts. So therefore, we shouldn't accuse them of apostasy or heresy. It is only God Almighty who will judge who is right or who isn't. But as much as possible, this vicious cycle of violence needs to end, and it needs to end now. So Muslims should not be marginalized in the counter-terrorism effort. The world is only treating the symptoms of the problem. When you shoot a Boko Haram operative, you've not really obliterated the main root cause of the problem. So therefore, the reasons that people are given is Western education has made their northern elite corrupt, and the current world system, which is capitalist, is ever increasing the gap between the rich and the poor. We have a world system that is supportive of homosexuality. These are fundamental ills of society that these people are riding on to recruit people to carry out attacks that are against the fundamental teachings of their religion. So society should put its acts together, and we will rob them of the conducive enabling environment to recruit other people. And Muslims should be at the forefront of that effort. What is the meaning of jihad? What are the conditions for even carrying out a jihad? How does Abu Bakr Baghdadi just, carve out a state or capture large swathes of Syria and Iraq and says he has declared the caliphate? What are the teachings in medieval Islamic teachings? What does Islamic jurisprudence say about what is happening in the geopolitics of the world? Our scholars have been unfortunately absent in that. So therefore, it becomes very difficult to map out a comprehensive strategy. And I agree with Mr. Tanko that this should be a holistic effort that should rope in all shapes and colors of people in society.
But Ilbad, let me cut you in. Yourself and Tanko keep saying that it's a collective effort, you and me. I mean, who constitutes you and me? I feel that this will be a leadership problem, that if we're looking at Muslim leaders taking the leadership to start any efforts to ensure that young Muslims are not radicalized, then we should put the responsibility squarely at their doorstep. Don't you think so?
Yes, but the world should also not create that, environment that will enable people to radicalize. And Steve, you need not to be a counterterrorism expert to know that the fact that Muslims are being killed in Central African Republic, there will be an insurgency in the next 3 years or so. You need not to be told this.
Yeah.
So it should be multi-pronged. The Muslims have a role to play, but we need to see justice to get served at all levels of international politics. When 10,000 Muslims are killed, there's no news. Why should 17 or 15 French people be killed and 40 world leaders meet in Paris? And thousands of people meet out of resentment at what has happened. When in fact in Syria alone, over 200,000 people have been killed. Bush's campaign in Iraq cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who are Muslims.
So this is what you mean by the root causes. This is what you mean by the root causes.
Steve, you studied in the UK, and perhaps when 7/7 happened, you were in that country.
Yes, I was.
What reasons did the 4 young men give? They said their brethren were being killed in Afghanistan. Why don't we stop invading Afghanistan? So we will rob them of the opportunity to get radicalized and to become lone wolves to carry out attacks at home. So I think we don't need a bottom-up approach. We need a top-down approach. The UN has a role to play, and the United States as a key power broker in international politics should be made to be getting justice being served in all countries, rather than marginalizing a few people and anticipating to live in peace.
Bob, we're grateful for your time on today's week. So we're still trying to get Dr. Kojo Pokuedo to wrap up with us on the political angle of all of this. So I'm sure you agreed with Irbad on quite a number of the issues which he raised, including that you and I mean, you've said it over and over that we all need to get involved in the process of de-radicalizing young Muslims. But we don't have radicalized Muslims in Ghana, do we?
No, we don't. Well, I don't sit at that luxury situation where I have the evidence. But frankly, I don't think we've got to that stage because of the very way our founding fathers structured the Ghanaian system. And when you look at the relationship between us and the non-Muslims, it's cordial, it's lovely.
Healthy
and that
also
has gone a long way to actually rid us of that potential. But that doesn't mean that we don't have some of the remnants of the things that actually get people to be radicalized. When you look at the Western world, one of the things is that there are a lot of people from the minority backgrounds with very high qualifications who don't get a job. Yeah. They don't get a job, and they're not losing out on jobs just because of the color of their skin. We don't have that situation. But we frankly have people in ghettos, if you like. You know, I come from a very deprived background. I come from Malam, and there are people who have finished school, they don't have work and all those things. So how are we dealing with it? That's why I'm saying that the effort is very collective. You look at it from the employment aspect of it, the education aspect of it, the religious aspect of it, and then the political aspect of it.
Social engineering aspect.
It requires a lot of money. So this issue about the imams giving leadership, yes, they can give the leadership, but they will require some money. They will require some money, and you've got to go back. And that's one of the things that I'm sure is escaping us. We don't have the madrasas in a much more high-profile situation. I mean, the Arabic training schools. But we need to keep an eye on there. You need to. It got to a stage where in the UK, they were very, very careful about the people who were teaching the children. Because because
that has become the wing of radicalizing young people. Even in Pakistan and in UK and wherever, these madrasas have become the core hub
the rooting ground.
Grooming
They're giving them the oxygen. Because it's about interpretation. And whatever it is, you can give it whatever interpretation you want to give it to. And these people actually give it an interpretation that is frankly appalling and disgraceful. So you need to make sure that those who are teaching your children are people who are actually giving them the interpretation that it's not very dangerous and extreme. And we are not keeping an eye on that. But this is something that I think going forward, the media especially, the media has to be very, very, very sensitive about the way...
How sensitive? I mean, you are a media law and ethics lecturer. How sensitive should the media be handling issues of communication when it comes to reporting terrorism, reporting Islamic extremism, and the other associated ills of radicalization.
Yeah, I mean, it's not peculiar to Ghana. It's an international issue where the way the media portrays Islam itself is a problem. Because sometimes some of these things that are perpetuated by these people who call themselves Muslim are purely criminal. It has to be put in that perspective. But as soon as you attach, Muslim terrorists, Muslims then take a situation and say, hang on, we can't be Muslims, and then they can't be Muslims and terrorists at the same time. As soon as you become a terrorist, then you move away from the definition of who is a Muslim.
That's right.
But it requires education. It requires education, and we're not doing that. And it's an international situation. But in Ghana, at least when you look at the UK and other areas, they are making the effort to try and get the media to understand the relationship between Islam and terrorism and violence.
Tanko, I'm afraid we'll have to bring our discussion to a close. And I'm happy that you could join us. Tanko Zakaria Mustafa is Media, Law and Ethics Lecturer at the Ghana Institute of Journalism, and I'm grateful that he could join us. Unfortunately, we were not able to get Dr. Kojo Pokoedu, who is a political science lecturer of the University of Ghana, on the telephone line. He agreed to speak to us earlier, but I reckon that he must have been caught up in some other engagements. My name is Stephen Enti, and thanks for staying. We'll be right back with an interactive segment.